This is The Roadmap with Lee Heisman.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to The Roadmap, exclusively here on ASBN.com. I'm Lee Heisman, and every week we bring you some of the brightest entrepreneurs, CEOs, and business owners who are climbing the ladder, scaling their businesses, and thinking one day how to exit stage left. I want to introduce my guest today, Jackson Locklear. Jackson, thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you for having me, Lee.
Owner of Graze Craze, Sandy Springs. I want to talk about that. I want to talk about your acquisition of that business and how you got into that particular business. But today, welcome as part of our Cliff Coast special session, and good seeing you this morning.
Yeah, great seeing you this morning as well.
So let's talk about the culinary space, talk about the hospitality space. Talk about your history. How did you get into this space?
Well, I grew up in a small southern family in South Georgia, and I like to say I was the only kid and the only guy allowed into a very matriarchal family. Youngest memories are helping my mom make cookies and cakes, and all the other kids would get the beaters to lick, and I would always get the bowl because I helped the most.
I like that.
But from there, went into college. It wasn't a really good fit for me. Loved learning, but I wanted to do something a little bit more kinetic. And about 2001, there were some things that were kind of going on in our family, and out of necessity, had to take a job. Worked at one of my cousin's restaurants in Statesboro, Georgia. Found a love for it. Ended up going to culinary school for a little bit, and then kind of bounced my way through different kitchens here in Atlanta. Ended up back down in Statesboro, Savannah area for a while. And then, me, a kid who grew up, my first school experience was a log cabin in South Georgia. And then my first flight was a one-way ticket to the Hamptons, where I ended up in the Hamptons for on and off for about 8 years.
Wait, your first flight, how old were you when you did that first
26.
Flight? So you'd never been on a plane up to
never
26?
Never been on a plane until 26.
And you went to elementary school, your first school was in a log cabin?
It was in a log cabin. It's still there to this day. It's a historical landmark now.
So people wouldn't believe this. So at 26, you take your first flight. Explain a one-way ticket to the Hamptons.
So I got a job, this was when Craigslist was still pretty big, pre-iPhones and everything. And I got a job up in New York. A good chef friend of mine, he had gotten in New York. We kind of fell back in touch together. And he's like, if I can make it in New York, you can. I said, sure. So did a couple applications. And then my mentor, who's still a great friend, Chef James G., he offered me a job over the phone and was like, hey, I'll see you if you get up here. Hung up the phone. And I was like, maybe I have a job. I didn't even know where I was going to sleep that night, but got a one-way flight flew into LaGuardia, kind of a crazy ride to get up to the Hamptons. I thought it was a suburb of Queens, 2.5 hours later on the LIR. I get off and there's a Maserati right next to a John Deere tractor, and I had no idea where I really was.
Brilliant. Yeah, it's first plane flight, log cabin, and you're in a Maserati in the Hamptons.
Yeah, pretty much.
Up there, did you start in the chef space? Did you start working at restaurants?
So, at that point in time, I'd already had some executive chef experience, but I took a step down because it was New York, and it was, hey, if I can become anything in New York, I'm going to become something great everywhere else. And so I took a step down. Sometimes you have to take a step backwards to take steps forwards, and worked my way from a lead line cook into the executive sous chef and eventually interim executive chef with the restaurant group up there in the Hamptons. During that time, because the Hamptons are so seasonal, summer season is always booming, we would take a group of us, and this is very common in the hospitality industry, especially in seasonal areas. A group of us ended up going up to Telluride, Colorado, where I worked at the ski resort. It's the only job I ever had to learn how to drive a snowmobile for my job. I literally would have to snowmobile my food up to the restaurant 2 to 3 times a week.
You're kidding me. So you'd secure it on your snowmobile and take it up to the restaurant?
And then have to take it up the restaurant. We would shut down for a blizzard every once in a while. Just very, very different logistics up there.
Than the Hamptons?
Yes.
Clearly.
Yes, very different logistics.
So how did you make your way back down to Atlanta, kind of where in the past decade? How long have you been down here?
I've been back in Atlanta. Well, after Telluride, I ended up with Jose Andres. I was one of his opening chefs at the Bazaar on South Beach. So got great experience working with Jose Andres.
So hold on, because people tend to just brush over all the hard stuff.
Yeah.
Jose Andres, a world-renowned chef.
World-renowned.
You just said, I just happened to be working with him.
Yeah.
Just tell a little bit, how does that happen?
So I guess it's relationship based because, and a little bit of fate. Blew out my knee skiing. so couldn't get to work anymore.
So this is in Telluride?
This is in Telluride. And from there, Chef James G., he was with Think Food Group at the time, now Jose Andres Group. And I gave him a call when I was driving cross country, and I was like, hey, I'm not real sure what I'm going to do next. And he said, Jose is opening up something in Miami. Are you interested? And I was like, yes, I'm interested. Miami and Jose, yeah, come on. It's all about those relationships that you build throughout your entire life and entire career. And I was fortunate enough to have surrounded myself with people who were much smarter than me and had been able to learn and kind of grow in their stead.
So you work down with a world-renowned chef.
And
you work intimately with him. He's there the whole time.
Well, more so with his other chefs. Ruben Garcia had a very close relationship with. He was his creative director. A number of the other chefs underneath his team. So a lot of the chefs from Mini Bar, which is his most famous restaurant. Jose is a whirlwind of a person. So he is exactly who you see on TV. There's no facade about him whatsoever. So when he would come in, it wasn't always side by side, but an hour with him, was like a lifetime with another chef. It was just so impactful. And,
so what you're saying is a little bit of Jose goes a long way.
A little bit of Jose goes a long way.
Okay,
in a good way. In a good way.
Fair. So talk about that. You worked there for how long? A few years and made your way back up to Atlanta?
So I worked there for about a year. And then after that, I started doing some consulting work. That's about the time when, once you put somebody like Jose on your resume, you start to get a little bit more, what I'm looking for?
Sure, clout, a little cachet.
Clout, yeah, a little bit more clout. You started to become noticed a little bit more. So I started dabbling in consulting.
And still this is in Miami?
This is still in Miami, but I was doing some work, was consulting up in the Hamptons, a little bit of stuff in the Southeast area as well. Ended up doing some stuff virtually out west, and then some stuff in DC virtually as well. But you did the consulting work, and then during that time, I was bound and determined to make that happen. But it wasn't exactly paying the bills. So I ended up getting some great corporate experience working with a recruiting company, and our company helped support Gulfstream Aerospace. So I worked very heavily with those engineers. And funny thing enough, in recruitment of engineers, I realized that so much of the chef world is so closely tied to engineering principles.
Interesting.
Not only did the professionalism from the company help me grow in ways that you don't typically learn in the kitchen, but I was able to go back and look at my entire career as a chef and look at the business of hospitality from a different light, from a different angle.
Sure.
Just having that exposure to those engineers and just how the world works, not just a kitchen, but how everything else works.
Yeah, it applies across the board. We see that all the time in entrepreneurship, where it doesn't really matter what industry you're in, you're the same person across all industries, and you're applying those skill sets accordingly.
Yeah.
So talk about Atlanta, and I do want to get into a main reason why you're here today is Graze Craze, Sandy Springs.
Yeah.
So you make your way to Atlanta.
Yeah, so made my way back here to Atlanta, did some consulting work, and was seeing a lot of progress from that. And then 2020 hit, and I don't know if you recall, but there was a little cold going around.
Sure.
And it was a great time to get back into hospitality. So, during that time, it was probably some of the hardest work that I've ever had to do, hard decisions to be made, hard physical work to be done. And the restructuring of hospitality kind of started, which was something that was overdue. We started to actually care about our people a little bit more. Gone were the days of throwing frying pans at cooks.
Fair.
And the toxicity that does happen, unfortunately, in hospitality, it did start to go away, and it was great to be a part of kind of that restructuring.
Well, this was the city to be in. If I'm incorrect, and for people out there that don't know, Atlanta, or Georgia, thanks to Governor Kemp, was the first state in this country to reopen restaurants. I think it was May of 2020. So many states were shut down, but I think we were actually open. I recall that.
We were very aggressive during COVID, and I think it really helped our state and helped hospitality workers continue to do what they love.
Well, let's talk about Graze Craze. And again, I'm going to say it. It's not a slogan, but today we don't want to get bored. And I'm going to bring a gift that I'm going to bring this up here. This is wonderful. I got a little bit of Graze Craze here, Sandy Springs. So talk about this. Thank you for bringing the gift.
No, it's my pleasure. I hope you guys are going to be able to enjoy it a little later. So Graze Craze kind of came about through, consulting work. I started to get involved with a number of different groups here in Atlanta, restaurateurs, heavy with R&D and operations, and then kind of fell into some catering opportunities. And during that time, I started to look and I was like, my passion kind of came back into cooking with catering because everything got to be more tailored towards somebody. You got to be creative, collaborative, wasn't in the kitchen as much because, you're more client facing. And I did what is a big trend right now. We have a huge shift in wealth happening in our country. The boomers who have all of these businesses that have been established. And so I started to look at, hey, maybe there's a catering company out there that has a book of business. And I was originally looking to acquire a book of business and then just kind of take it to that next level. So during my search, I came across Graze Craze. And, with my experience that I had with catering, having sat on the International Caterers Association Culinary Committee and being a part of that group and seeing how many mom and daughter spots were getting so much market share within the catering space just with charcuterie. It wasn't originally my intention, but after looking at what Graze Craze does, the support from United Franchise Group as well, which is the master franchise group holder, the people were great. The products aligned with what I stand behind as a chef. All of our meats here are nitrate free. Our chocolate comes from the Chickasaw Nation in Oklahoma, which is near and dear to me. I'm part Lumbee Indian as well. So being able to, kind of support indigenous people, it's a great thing. All of our dips, jams, hummuses, jellies, they're all made in-house. We go to the market every day to get our produce fresh.
Wow.
So all of those things align very much with my core values as a chef. The Graze Craze Franchise Group, United Franchise Group, they aligned with my core values as a person. And there was a franchise that was for resale. I never thought I'd have a brick and mortar, never thought I'd have a franchise, but all the stars kind of started to align late last year. And then, it was, as I mentioned, was a resale. So we already had the structure, the bones were there. We just needed to dust it off a little bit, kick the tires. But we closed on the business in late January, and then March 17th was our opening day. So
congratulations again. Luck of the Irish, I like that.
Yeah.
So March 17th, my wedding anniversary. St. Patty's Day. You're exactly right. For you, those of you who don't either, March 17th, I'm always going to know it's St. Patty's Day as well as my wedding anniversary.
There you go.
So talk a little bit, and as I know time flies when you're having fun, you have your expertise. You're very clear that these align not just with your core values, but also the quality of the food that you work with, because you are a consultant and also a private chef.
Correct.
And you've worked amongst, for listeners out there and viewers out there, Atlanta's now a little bit coming on the scene. I know for the past 20 years that I've been here, there's been no Michelin star restaurants in Atlanta, but now 2 years ago into this year, there's a lot more popping up.
So Michelin started coming here is 25. So Michelin started coming in 23, I believe, if I'm not mistaken. And we've got some amazing chefs here who have brought, all of the Michelin quality from their experience they've been able to bring here to Atlanta. I still think there are some hidden gems here. They deserve Michelin myself.
So can you name a few that are not Michelin rated, but I'd have to know. You're the private chef. You've worked with world-class chefs across the world, of course, the country, pardon me. Give me your top 2 or 3 that are not Michelin rated.
Are not Michelin rated or not Michelin starred?
Not Michelin starred, pardon me.
Okay, so I love Chef Jared over at the Alden.
Alden.
Yes, he's an incredible chef. He was at Noma for a few years, which was the #1 restaurant in the world.
Of course.
And he's got a great culture there with what he does with his team. Kind of the same thing as well. He's going to the market every day to pick everything.
Where's Noma located? What country?
Noma's in Copenhagen.
Copenhagen, that's right. That chef was at Blackberry Farm many years ago and came in to do some work at Blackberry.
Yeah. They're great. Chef Jared, he's an incredible chef there.
Fair.
So I'd say that'd be my #1. Outside of that, this is just me being Atlantan.
We need to hear it.
Waffle House. There's something to
the Waffle House.
There's something to, not after midnight, but
okay, fair.
But breakfast Waffle House, you really can't beat it.
This is a cultural choice.
This is a cultural choice. This is something that I wish Michelin could go by each Waffle House, and let's get one of those really recognized.
I like that. Very, very true. And now we talked a little bit earlier, and just for viewers out there, there's a TV show called The Bear that tries to represent the chef world that you've done. Is that accurate or inaccurate?
It's so accurately, I cannot even watch the show. I lived it. The first season, I would watch it, and I would literally start sweating and having, a chef's form of PTSD.
Really?
And there's a number of chefs that we want to watch it, but it hits so close to home that, we need a break, because when you're living it, it can be a little intense.
Fair. Well, Jackson, again, 15 minutes flies by like that. Thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thank you for having me.
How do people get in touch with you? Not just at your shop now, which is amazing with the quality of what you've done as a private chef, now also having a brick and mortar store. Talk about the best way people to get in touch with you.
So best way to get in touch with me is probably going to be going through my Instagram. Chef JB Locklear on Instagram. I've got an affiliate link to my private chef business there. I respond frequently to DMs. And then also there's a Smeeple app out there as well if you're looking for any consulting services, and you can find me on that platform also.
First off, you're a pro looking right into the camera. That was very impressive. Secondly, what does the B stand for?
So that's my middle initial. So I've got 3 last names, Jackson Brown Locklear.
Oh, yes.
Our generation, like I said, a big matriarchal family. So my grandfather, Gene Brown, we wanted to be sure that we could continue to carry on that name as well. So that's the word.
I like it, JB. I'm going to start referring you to that. Jackson Locklear, JB, if I'm okay to do that.
I've been called way worse.
Okay, fair. Thank you so much for coming on the show. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us today. Jackson, spectacular. I'm going to be hitting your shop a lot more and also talk to you about the private chef stuff. Guys, I hope this show was as insightful for you as it was for myself, and we hope to see you again next week on another episode of The Roadmap.
Thanks for watching The Roadmap with Lee Heisman.